Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first Radical Joy for Hard Times Global Earth Exchange webinar. We're so glad that everybody has showed up. We're very excited to be doing this. And I am Trebbe Johnson. I'm the founder of Radical Joy for Hard Times. And with us here today, we also have Joanne Martin and Judy Todd, who are both very active members of Radical Joy for Hard Times and makers of beauty in wounded places. The way the webinar will work is we're dividing it into three parts. We're going to talk first of all about why people do the Global Earth Exchange. We're going to share our personal experiences as well. And we're then going to talk about how you can get others involved. And finally, we're going to tell you about the four different ways, of the four different steps of doing a Global Earth Exchange. So the first part that we're going to do is why do a Global Earth Exchange anyway? 2016 is our 7th Global Earth Exchange. And typically people do this event because they feel great concern for the places around them that are being destroyed through human and natural acts. And they often do simple private practices to bring Radical Joy for Hard Times acts of beauty and gifts to these places. But what's special and significant about the day of the Global Earth Exchange, which this year is June 18th, Saturday, is that you have the sense of knowing that people all over the world are going to these places that they love and mourn, and sharing their stories and their feelings about these places and making a simple gift of beauty for them. So it's often people often tell us that they go to these places, sometimes not even really wanting to, and they end up falling in love with them and having a whole different sense of empowerment, community, compassion, and creativity as a result. So the basic reason for doing it is you love a place, you care about it, and you want to get re-involved with it. So let's find out what Judy and Joanne have to say. Judy Todd is the founder and the director of Nature Connect Northwest. She leads groups all around the Pacific Northwest where she is a 5th-generation Oregonian. And she is also one of the most active climate change activists in a way where she is truly living what she believes in. So Judy, tell us about why and how you do the Global Earth Exchange, or why.
Yeah, thanks, Trebbe. Wow, 5th generation, that makes me seem really old. And then I realized, oh, I am. And part of what I came to really later in life, in the last many years, was Radical Joy for Hard Times. So I found it through a mutual friend. I had been in the concern as a citizen, like so many of the people on this call are, about what's happening on the planet, what's happening with communities, what's happening in our natural lands, and what's happening with habitat of all kinds. And when I heard about Radical Joy for Hard Times, just the name itself really caught my attention. And I'd been writing and thinking and talking about how do we humans navigate our despair as well as our joy of being present to what's on the planet. So when I found out what Trebbe was doing and later had a chance to meet her and did my very first Radical Joy for Hard Times event, it was natural for me to do that in a clear cut. I had real concern about the state of the forests of the Pacific Northwest, given that they are an amazing temperate rainforest that are providing huge amounts of lung capacity for the rest of us and are sequestering carbon. And we're taking them down like there's no tomorrow, which makes me worry, is there a tomorrow? So that was the place that I shared with a whole series of people in my community through a number of ways that maybe we'll talk about later. but it captured the imagination and the attention of many of my friends. And we ended up with, I think, around 30 or so people walking in off a logging road where there was active cutting going on above us to an older clear cut, had been cut about 2 or 3 years prior because the land had grown up around it. There were some new trees. It hadn't actually been planted as a crop yet. We spent the day there. What called everyone, because this was part of what we did, is we shared about why did you come and what's important to you about radical joy for these hard times. And again, people spoke about their concerns and their worry and the difficulty of having ways in our ordinary everyday life, let alone once a year, to really honor and witness what's happening and feel those feelings and share those in community in a safe environment, and then be able to work through that together, to walk through that or drum through that, or whatever the group decides to do together, to find a place of seeing the beauty and rediscovering that connection and our joyful relationship to the earth. So really what drew me is being a creature of the planet and knowing that it's important for me to stay connected to the earth. That's what did it. And I'm really thankful that I heard about Radical Joy for Hard Times, and I've been participating, as Trebbe says, ever since, in a number of places with a number of different folks. That's probably enough of that story. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. And Joanne Martin lives in Western Pennsylvania, and a place that has been much fracked for gas. And she is a partner in East Vision Partners, which is an organization that she founded that is devoted to helping people and organizations develop a more ecological identity. Joanne, tell us why you participate in the Global Earth Exchange.
Thanks, Trebbe. Oh, why do I do Global Earth Exchanges? Well, for me, I think, just to start out, it is a way for me to communicate with the land. It's not just for me to say something, but it really gives me an opportunity to learn how to listen to the land and how does the land speak to me in different ways. I really feel called to offer my reverence to the land. I feel really drawn to expressing my gratitude. I feel so much in a day, even now, powerful despair and guilt about the way we are treating the earth. And I say we because it's so difficult to not be complicit in some way and to impact the land in a way that I might not really want to. So I feel helpless sometimes to do anything other than to honor the earth through these Global Earth Exchanges. And my first Global Earth Exchange was actually scheduled and canceled. I think it was in 2012. My mother had a severe injury and she was in the hospital. And so now, instead of hosting my Global Earth Exchange, I was going to be driving in the car for 7 hours. And so what I decided to do the day before is I painted the windows of my car, the back windows, not the front window, with Radical Joy birds and the phrases about bringing beauty into wounded places. I even put the website across my back window. And I can clearly remember that car ride, how I felt as I was driving along. I actually felt like I was in this conversation all across the Pennsylvania Turnpike with the land, the sky, the birds, all the beings. And here I was careening down the highway at 70 miles per hour with this Radical Joy message on my car. And I felt, for the whole ride, really, I felt this feeling of euphoria and peacefulness at the same time. And I don't usually feel joy when I'm driving in a car for 7 hours. So there really was a way that I was transformed by carrying this message across the landscape. And people, when I stopped at rest stops, people asked me about it. And so it was really so fun to be able to talk to people and tell them about it. And that was the beginning for me. I then organized other Global Earth exchanges, and also some ways that were not just in June, but during the week. I started to just think in a different way about seeing the land wounded and what could I do in that moment. So that's why I do them. I feel close to the land, and I feel connected, and in a place of honor and reverence for the land and the landscape. Yeah.
Thank you, Joanne. And I resonate with what both of you said. And personally, I love the Global Earth Exchange, and I love knowing that people all around the world are going to all these different places. And we've had some extraordinary connections. You know, we had a group in Kabul, Afghanistan, cleaning up around a bomb crater. We had one person doing her Earth Exchange at her sister's family farm, which had just burned to the ground.
Wow.
There's so many. We have a group in Bali who participates every year by cleaning up their village. And people make birds out of all kinds of things in all kinds of places. We'll talk about the birds later, but I feel really connected to all of these people around the world, thinking about and giving something back. It's like giving back a gift to a place that you love, and everybody doing it on the same day in their own way. So that's why it's very meaningful to me. And of course, part of this event, this adventure that we call the Global Earth Exchange, is about who do you do it with. A lot of people do it on their own. I myself have done it on my own several times, or just with my husband. But it has a special kind of significance when we can do it with our friends or our colleagues. And so we're going to spend the next part of this discussion talking about how to get others involved. And I think Judy has been particularly inspiring in this regard. So let's start with Judy and tell us about how you get your friends involved in the Global Earth Exchange, because I think it can be challenging, you know, suggesting to people, let's go to a damaged place, let's go to a clear cut, let's go to that polluted river, let's go to a farm where they're fracking. And you're sort of afraid, I myself was at first. You're sort of afraid people are going to say, my God, is she crazy? You know, why would I want to do something so depressing? And on a Saturday when I have so many other things to do, and making a gift to a place, is that, you know, that's kind of odd, isn't it? So if you're having any kind of senses like that, you're in very good company. And I would say perhaps even with us, certainly with me. So that's why we're devoting this part of the webinar to how to get others involved. Judy, I've said enough.
Well, you've raised a lot of good points. There are so many kinds of responses when I've shared the idea of Radical Joy for Hard Times, when I've shared the event, you know, to do a Global Earth Exchange together, because it does, you know, it could be actually. It's been me alone, and it's been me with many others, and everything in between. And that's the June, you know, this year, the June 18th event. So I've tried a bunch of things because I'm kind of a group person. I like working with groups. It's something that I feel comfortable with, and that's not true for everyone. So sometimes there's just a personal style. And so I think I encourage myself and others to do what is most your style, because there isn't a right way, of course. I think the key thing for me has been, what can I say, and how can I describe? How can I even get into the conversation that would end up in an invitation, or maybe co-creating, partnering up, collaborating to do an event? So I listen for cues. You know, I listen for when I'm speaking. I mean, it's something I'm interested in. So when I'm with people and around my friends, family, and various, you know, like people that I do work with or meet with, I listen for their sensibility about what is of concern to them and what's important to them. And that's really what I think about when I decide to ask them or to talk to them about Radical Joy for Hard Times. I think about what I know about them. So it's not a blind invitation often. It's really, you know, I care that people have a way to navigate these difficult times we're in when we are present to so much destruction and hardship and suffering. I think it matters that we help ourselves and one another find a way to witness and work through those and figure out what is ours to do. So I'm always kind of interested in how people are thinking about the hard times and where their joy lives. And I often ask them, what is the thing you most love in your life? Or what's the place you most love on this planet that you keep returning to, either in your dreams or, you know, in reality? You go there every year for vacation, or you want to take your kids there. So I'm kind of just interested in that. And then I do everything. I practice on my friends. I invite them first to people who already know me and already might say yes, just because I asked. I use all kinds of tools. I use all the social media. You know, I send out emails. Sometimes I make a little flyer and send it to people. I use Facebook a lot for Radical Joy. I use the Radical Joy website and the Radical Joy Facebook pages, and I forward those or share those with people because there's tons of information on our website and beautiful pictures and some powerful videos. And so I want to use all the tools that might resonate for the people I'm inviting. And sometimes I just remind my friends, bring a friend. And that's my Sharon story, which was what I think happens naturally. I shared with a friend, and she brought her friend. I hadn't any idea that that friend Sharon was coming. And we were out in the Coast Range where a historic 800-plus-year-old Sitka spruce had finally fallen to the ground. And the final blow to that historic tree was the clear cut across the stream on the other ridge. And when the winter storms had come through that year, that old Sitka spruce grandmother could no longer stand. And down she came. Now, like many trees in a storm, she didn't break at the ground. She broke about 40 feet above the ground. And in their attempts to keep the park clean and looking nice, the Forest Service staff had gone in and just sliced through her about 8 feet above the ground, maybe 10. And it just was weird. Here was this massive old Sitka spruce that obviously had been cut cleanly across the top to pretty her up and to avoid, you know, extra debris. So it was a kind of double assault. It was that the tree had finally lost her life, and that it was a result of loss of the surrounding forest that had been protecting her for hundreds of years. And then in an effort to make it look nice, we had gone back and cleaned her off so that she would not be perhaps offensive in some way. It was just strange. Sharon met that tree and basically fell to her knees. She was just stunned, both at the immensity of this old growth Sitka spruce and the lack of understanding. It wasn't something she expected. She also found in the circle telling the story of all of the trees that she had known over the years, some of which she had named, some of which she had sat upon their roots or against their, their trunks and told stories and slept and just had this special relationship with trees. And it all came home to her when she met that Sitka spruce that day of Global Earth Exchange. And as she told me later, it changed everything for her. Unexpectedly, surprisingly, joyfully, her latest project, because once you're infected, that's it. Her latest project is a food farm at a junior college, what used to be the landscaping. She applied for and received a $2,500 grant to go in and make what used to just be landscaping actually an edible garden for the neighborhood, for the students, and of course, it has trees in it. So it's both a great story and it's also something awakened. And I think this is what happens when we invite people. We are inviting them into the possibility of something awakening for them that adds such joy and meaning to their lives that it's kind of like to hold back on inviting people seems like an unkindness. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I think about it. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. And you remind me of something that another of our very active people who does Global Earth Exchanges from Missouri said last year, that a woman came to a Superfund site with her, and she said, I started out doing it for Sasha, but I ended up doing it for the land.
Yeah.
So, Joanne, tell us how you get people involved in this.
Well, all of the Global Earth Exchanges that I've done so far have really been associated with the gas fracking, the development here. And I am active with an anti-fracking group locally. And even with them, it hasn't been easy to get them to come to these events, the Global Earth Exchanges, because they're very involved in protest and going to EPA meetings and doing the legislative work and participating in educational events. And very often the response is, we don't have time for this. And I'm, I try not to get preachy, but I try to explain that it's really important to kind of feed our souls and our spirits in a way of coming together and not just doing the hard work of the activism and the education. So pausing to celebrate the land or honoring the land isn't for some people, and yet once, as Judy and Trebbe have both said, sometimes once they get there, there's really some sort of profound experience that happens. And what has worked best for me working with this group is sending out personal invitations to people. I actually call them on the phone, and these are people I know. And these are people that some of them I don't know very well, but I really try to come to know something about what their concerns are, and then try to select a place that everybody is really interested in gathering around. And one of the questions, Trebbe, from one of the viewers that we have is, does it have to be a wounded place that this event takes place? And I'll just take a second to answer that question right now and say no. One of the Earth Exchanges that I did was around a reservoir that wasn't at all wounded. It was beautiful. Yes, it was potentially threatened, but sometimes the areas are off limits, and a lot of the farms for fracking, they're private, or the land where the pipeline is, the land is private, and it's not accessible. So what I've done and what we did that one year is we had a ceremony just acknowledging the water locally and the water everywhere and honoring water everywhere. The other thing that I wanted to add about the event itself is I really don't organize something with a rigid format. I keep it really loose and informal, and in the invitation, just indicate that we're going to come and bring our own unique expression. And that way, for the Shire people, I also mentioned that if they don't want to speak or be part of something, they can just witness and observe, so that everybody can join in some way, in whatever way they're comfortable. And the last year when we were at this reservoir, everybody, they were very eager and they all wanted to do something. Oh, I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to sing a song. I want to sing a song. And then somebody had a poem they brought, and there was a minister there that, had a special thing that he wanted to do. And initially it was like, wow, this is like out of control. And it was beautiful because everybody did what they wanted. And there was this particular gentleman who for years at all these fracking things was always highly agitated, stoked, just talking a mile a minute, and you could never get him to stop. He just went on and on and on. And in this event last year, he was, all of a sudden he was talking and he stopped and his mouth dropped open and he looked across the river and he said, "Look at the osprey." And this man was dumbfounded to silence. He didn't say another word for the rest of but we all sat there probably for a full 3 minutes and just watched this osprey, and it dove into the water and fished and went back into the tree. And it was just such a beautiful, touching event. So again, anything goes. Whatever people show up and feel they want to bring and do, whether somebody brings a piece of art. The bird is central, and Trebbe's going to talk about the 4 steps. But if it's 2 steps or 3 steps or 6 steps, that's what I've loved about this. And Trebbe and everybody has always been so encouraging. Do what feels right. Do whatever feels right for who shows up, and just be open. So I think I'll turn it back over to you, Trebbe. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Joanne. And what both of you have said reminds me of a few extra things. One is that, as Joanne just mentioned, there's no rules. There's no right way to do a global earth exchange, or any kind of earth exchange, or any of our ways of offering beauty to the places that we love. The whole point is to get reconnected with the places where we live and that we love, because how are we going to survive in the world if we're not connected with the places where we love? And this is a really simple and direct, portable, easily accessible way of doing that. And because there's no right way, you can do it alone. You don't have to mobilize a group. And and that, frankly, that was one of the things that kept me stuck for years and years and years when I was trying to figure out, how do you make beauty for a wounded place? I thought, you're going to have to be a person who's not like me. You're going to have to be an activist and a mobilizer and a publicist and all this stuff. You don't. You can make beauty for the earth alone, and many people do, and that's fine. You don't have to convince other people. And in fact, one of the ways that often works in order for as a bridge to a global earth exchange is to get in touch with somebody who's had trouble, whose neighbor's woods have been cut down, who's lost a favorite tree, whose sister had a fire in her farm, like the woman that I described earlier, who's living with some kind of situation that's bothering her or him, and offer to go and be with them on that day and create something together. There are also several people who have done global earth exchanges over the years who let their kids run the whole thing. There's a group in Chicago, and the kids have been running this thing since they were 7 and 9. And I think they're 12 and 14 now. And they invite their friends, and they take over, and they create a bird, and they offer blessings to the river or the earth or whatever it is. So it's a way of being together and of letting whatever happens unfold, and of keeping it simple, and knowing that however you do it, people intuitively know how to be with a place, and they always welcome. I would say always. People are always glad to get reattached to a place that they care about and they might have gotten separated from. So all of these are suggestions for how to get others involved and and how to just do it yourself if you prefer to start out by doing it that way. So we wanted to, we're going to have time for some questions in a few minutes. You can start to think about your questions. You'll see a Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and mine seems to have disappeared. So if somebody else has one from the panelists, that would be helpful. So if you have a question, you can write your question down, and we'll answer it after we talk about the 4 suggested steps to the global Earth exchange, which is the next part. As we said a few minutes ago, there are 4 suggested steps of the global Earth exchange, and you can change these around. You certainly don't have to go in order. You can add many of them in between. You can skip around. Really, the most important one, the really most essential one, is this number 4. Make a simple gift of beauty for the place, usually a bird made of materials the place itself provides. So I'll just briefly go through the steps and elaborate a bit on them. Go and visit a wounded place. We had a question about, does it have to be wounded? It doesn't have to be wounded. But the reason we focus on wounded places with Radical Joy for Hard Times is because wounded places often get neglected. We simply abandon them because we feel like going to them is going to be too painful and too difficult. And by going there, we actually come to realize it's a real strong feeling of empowerment that you can go to places and you can feel your feelings about what's happened there, whether it's grief or loss or outrage or fear or discomfort or numbness or excitement. There's nothing right or wrong. It's simply a way of getting reconnected. And so that's why we advise strongly actually going there and not just sitting at home and meditating about it. That's fine too, but that actual physical visit is important. And we also caution, don't do anything that's illegal or dangerous. Those people that I mentioned from Missouri who went to the Superfund site, they were outside the gates. They were not inside doing something that could get people extremely ill. We don't trespass. We don't advise trespassing. But it's about going there in whatever way you best can. The second part is sit a while and share your stories of what the place means to you. And what that means is just taking some time when you arrive for everybody to get present. Maybe there are people who don't have personal stories about the place. They've never been there before. But just by being there, they can look around and their impressions come in. They're reminded of things. They have a reaction to what they're seeing. And it's really a great way to just involve everybody, to get everybody present and sitting on the ground if possible and talking about how they're affected by this, the emotional response. The third part is get to know the place as it is now. What that means is taking a few minutes. It could be 15 or 20 minutes. Usually 20, 30 minutes is a good amount of time, where everybody in the group has a chance to go off on their own and just see what's there and respond to it. And to notice, it's like notice what you're noticing. A really wonderful example is the first time I ever did anything like this, many years before there was a Radical Joy for Hard Times. Some of us at a meeting went to visit an acreage in Virginia that had been in a forest fire. And people had all sorts of experiences. One man followed a buck that was trying really hard to find some greenery in this place. Another woman knelt down beside a charred little sapling and wept because it reminded her of her sister who was undergoing radiation for cancer. Another man put charcoal all over his face and his arms and did a dance for the place. And so it's just about going there and seeing what you see, because it's getting to know the place anew. And then you could add a 3A in here, which many people do, and that's to share, for everybody to come back together again after their time alone and just share what they've discovered. And you might run into people saying, well, nothing happened. Nothing happened to me. But just because every person brings all of their biography, their gifts, their loves, their fears, and their way of perceiving to this place, something always happens. Nothing ever doesn't not happen. And that, to me, always feels like a way of bringing new life to a place, giving a place back its stories. When it falls on hard times, it feels like it loses its stories. This is a way of bringing the stories back. And then, of course, the fourth one is make a simple gift of beauty for the place. And on the Global Earth Exchange, just because everybody all over the world is doing it, we advise, we suggest that this be a bird made of materials that the place itself offers. And as you can see from these pictures, it can be sticks, stones, it can be sand, it can be rubbish, which then people take away afterwards. It can be stones, twigs, flowers, people. It can be anything. And then we put on our website a slideshow of all the beautiful birds that come in from all over the world. From one year, we even had 7 continents participating. We typically have many, many countries participating every year in many states. So you can look on the website and see all these incredibly beautiful birds. And as a result, as an end result of doing these steps, people often say that they feel they've fallen in love with a place. And it's kind of surprising when you think of it, that people might not have even wanted to do this thing, and at the very end, they fall in love with this place. So, so those are the steps, and you can read the stories of all the people that have done these Global Earth Exchanges in the past by going to our website, radicaljoyforhardtimes.org, and clicking on Global Earth Exchange, and there are stories there on that under that menu from past years, as well as photos. And some of the stories are really quite elaborate, and others are very simple, because again, everything fits, everything works. So so that's our 3 parts of the Global Earth Exchange, and we're going to have time to move on to questions in a minute. But before we do that, I want to ask whether Joanne and Judy have anything that you would like to add about the Global Earth Exchange, about the 4 steps, about anything else that we've left out.
You've been really thorough, Trebbe. I'm just tracking our time here for us as timekeeper today, and it's 1:48. I don't have anything to add. When we get to the questions, I have taken down a couple of questions that have come in during the time, so we can circle back to that. Judy?
Judy, you're muted. Judy, you're muted. We couldn't hear what you said.
Thanks. I don't think I have anything to add either, but I will kind of go ahead and put up the information about how people can get to our website, because it seems to me that that's a pretty key piece. And also to let them know the date. Sorry, I'm just getting here to my slideshow. So there you go. So I invite folks to go and look at some of the photos. There's some fabulous videos. It's a pretty photo-strong website. And if you plan to do an event by yourself or with a friend or with an entire community, please be sure and register your event. You'll find a registration button on the website, because it will let us see where you are, who you are, and what a little bit about the place or the reason or the times or even the community that's gathering. One of the key things I think that's coming out of our work as a nonprofit organization around the world is we're connecting communities. We're being present together. We're taking this action from our hearts and for the earth together. That brings us, in my experience, that brings a certain kind of healing to our relationships as well as to these places. And it seems to me that both are pretty key. So I just invite people to go jump on the website and participate on June 18th.
Yes. Thank you, Judy. So Joanne, you said you had some questions.
Yes, and we can just say again to everybody that's here that in order to ask a question, there on the bottom is a Q&A button. And if you have the opportunity to type in a question, and then we'll bring it up in the session here. So some of these questions that I've been taking down, as we've noticed, are already been answered. One, do we have to register? And Judy, you just spoke to that. Another question is, what are the birds made from, and why is it a bird? Now, I know, Trebbe, if you want to just take a minute and say how the bird, the Radical Joy bird, came to be.
Yeah, it's actually a great story. And I want to say one thing about registering. You don't have to register, but if you do register, your event gets listed on our map, and you get a T-shirt, a free, beautiful Radical Joy for Hard Times T-shirt. Global Earth Exchange. Yeah, the story of the bird's really great. It's on the website under About Us. But it came about at our very first board meeting when we weren't even a nonprofit yet, and one of our members had brought this huge piece of paper, and so there were 8 of us crawling around on the ground drawing on it, and we couldn't make any sense of it at all, so we took it outside and stood it up, and eventually one of the men noticed that it looked like a bird marching into a lot of chaos. And so that became our symbol. And we also love the idea that it's a bird for other reasons, because every culture has birds. It's not it doesn't belong to anybody in particular. Everybody knows how to create a bird. And when I was a little kid, I'd made a bird by making a sort of loopy W thing, And another thing about birds is birds sing no matter what is going on, and they fly no matter what is going on. So they are incredibly good models for us about how we can find and embody joy and beauty no matter what's going around us. So that's the bird story.
That's great, Trebbe. We do have another question here, and this participant is asking, one of the men who recently put a new roof on his home asked him for help to learn how to develop a practice of meditation. And he wants his practice to be more grounded in the natural world, but feels a bit weird meditating in a way that seems like he's talking to himself. So the question this person is asking is, what would you suggest for my approaching this man with an invitation to join me for a global Earth exchange? So I don't know, Trebbe or Judy, if either one of you wants to answer that.
Judy, you want to answer?
Sure, because I think the question reminds me of something that I was mentioning earlier, which is once someone shares something like that, feeling weird, wishing they had a practice, it seems like it's a huge opening. Like, well, if you did have a practice, what would you be honoring? I mean, I think getting curious with one another is really very honoring of our own places, sometimes hidden even from ourselves, of what really matters to us, particularly when we're feeling that some of those areas of our broken heart are hard to talk about. So to have someone be gently curious and invite more into the conversation about what is it I care about, and what kind of a practice might it be, and what if people think it's strange? What if they think it's wonderful? To really explore that together as friends, as sudden, as new friends. Like maybe you've never talked to this person before, but it's right there in front of you. It's something you're sharing right here, right now. Getting curious in an interested way is, I think, a natural thing that we do. And I think once one has the practice themselves or has attended an Earth event, a global Earth event, it's even easier to enter into those conversations. So I'd say try something. Try something from your own heart of hearts, and try something that enters into a deeper and more interested relationship with the person before you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what comes up for me.
Yeah, and another way also, of course, is to always to ask somebody whether there's a place that they care about that they feel sad about because something has happened to it.
Yeah.
And that's a good opener.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah. So anybody else wants to type in a question in the Q&A box that's down on the bottom of your screen? And you said something, Trebbe, when you opened that I just wanted to say about falling in love with an ugly landscape. And one of the ways that I have been so transformed in this process is I know that I closed my eyes. I averted my eyes. I didn't look at the ugly places or the places where people dump garbage. And I go there now. And I feel that those places deserve special attention, particularly if they've been harmed through our acts of humans. And so it's made me to be able to tolerate parts of the world that I was previously ignoring and was in denial about, maybe. So I think that transformation piece for me, and that's kind of, in closing for me today, that's to fall in love with an ugly place is a really special thing.
Mm.
Well, I hope that this webinar has answered questions for you, and that you have found some more inspiration other than what originally drew you to sign up for this webinar in the first place, to go ahead and try it out this year on June 18th. We have recorded this, so it's available if you missed any part of it, or if you would like to show it to anybody else. We'll be sending the links out. And our next webinar is going to be May 25th. Am I right, or is it the 26th?
It's
25.
20.
It's 3 weeks from today.
Yeah.
May 25. Same time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. And on that one, we're going to be focusing specifically on two things. Different things that you can actually do sort of within those 4 steps, different things that people have done for their Global Earth Exchange, and also how the Global Earth Exchange is its own kind of ceremony, and what that means to have a ceremony and be part of a ceremony that you create yourself. So
it is May 26th, which is the Thursday.
May 26th. Thank you very much. So thank you to Joanne and to Judy for all of your insight and input and information, and thanks to everybody for listening, and we will hope to see you on the 26th. Okay. Bye.
Bye. Thank you all.
Okay.